Hey everyone, Ami from Atlanta Diamond Design here. So today what we have is we have this, this is the ring that we made. What we have to do is we have to add wax and put it on our base. And we also have to add leads so that when we do the casting, we can make sure that there's enough metal being injected so that everything gets filled and we have a whole ring when we're finished. So that's kind of what we're here to do now. So the first thing we need to do is add a wax base where we're going to attach everything to. So that's what we're doing here. And what we have here is our sticky beeswax, which makes it really easy to stick this to the base later. So I like to use this as the base.
Okay. So you're putting beeswax on the bottom of the resin that you guys printed?
Yes. And so this beeswax is very, very sticky, which makes it a lot easier when we're going to put it on our base here. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. So once I have the beeswax, that's when, so we're going to add a little bit more of this red wax. Now we're going to melt everything together. Because what our goal here is to extend the base a little bit, because when we add the sprues to the ring, we need something to attach it to. Make sure everything's nice and smooth. Dry everything, let it cool. So it's nice and dry. And then what we have to do now is we have to inspect the piece and figure out where we're going to add the connections so that, well, they're called leads basically, so that when we cast the piece, there's enough metal so that everything gets filled. So that's when we have these really thin pieces of wax like this. Well, they come in all different thicknesses. So for something like this ring, I think I'm going to use the thinnest one, because it seems like the most appropriate for the placement. And from what I see, I know for sure I want this really long head, the top part. I for sure know that I need some leads on either side there to fill. And then I need to figure out some placement on the actual shank, because you see how this has a bunch of negative space in between? So when you have a lot of negative space in a ring like this, when we're casting and the gold is flowing, so it's going to start flowing from the bottom here. And it's going to go up and fill the ring. All this negative space, when it thins out, are areas where the gold is going to end up cooling. The gold, platinum, silver is going to end up cooling. So if we don't add extra leads, what will end up happening is it will cool faster than it can fill, and you won't get a complete casting. So that's the point of the lead, basically. So I know I need one here. I probably need them in the corner right here, halfway up. And that's probably what I'll do. And so we need to attach it to the base, kind of like that. And I like to take a little bit of beeswax to make sure that's going to stick. And then, once we're finished with that, we have to clean it up. So there's a whole bunch of different tools we can use for the cleanup. Let me find my straight edge. Because we want to make sure that none of the wax filled any of the detail in the ring. We don't want to lose any of the sharpness. And same thing with the inside. Okay. And then we go back and smooth out. Turn the temperature down a bit. And sometimes you have to repeat this process a couple of times. Make sure you have a good hold and you're not losing any of the detail. Okay, so that's one side. Now we'll do the center. Center's usually, this one looks like it's going to be a bit easier than the side. Okay, we're going to add some wax to the top there to fill it out. So not to get too technical, but the areas where these leads meet up with the ring, they're called gates. And that's where the gate is where the metal is flowing into the actual ring that you're trying to cast. And so you want to make sure that when the wax, the gate, when the wax meets the ring, it doesn't create any sharp corners. And so what we're doing here is adding a little bit of wax to the gates to make sure that everything is kind of spread out and there's no sharp corners. Because anytime you have a sharp corner, you are creating a point of potential failure where the investment will break down. And when that happens, you end up with some imperfections in the casting. So it's not uncommon for castings to have some imperfections that need to be worked out in the final product. But we do try and, avoid them as much as we possibly can. Okay, so we're going to let it cool, see what it looks like. I also like to add a little bit of wax to connect the leads if I have multiple leads on a ring. Sometimes a ring only has one lead. I do believe I have, when we get to the base and we're adding the other rings, I can show you a ring with only one lead. Okay, so now what we have to do, it looks pretty good to me. Probably clean it up just a little bit, but this is pretty much done on this side. We're going to want to mirror it on the other side. So I prefer to sprue it on the underneath of the ring because that's the place where we're going to be cleaning it out. Anyway, when we're working on the bench. Some people like to sprue it on the side. You know, you could sprue it like right here on the side. But that creates another area that needs to be cleaned. It's not necessarily a negative, but if I can avoid it, I try to make the jeweler's job a little bit easier when he's cleaning. So just like on the other side, I'm expanding the gate here on the top. Now here's where it gets fun. Try to navigate around everything. There we go. Okay, let's clean it up. Yep.
Can I ask a question yet?
Yes.
So you talked about the beeswax being like more slippery or better?
More sticky.
So is it undesirable to do all of this with beeswax?
You could, however, the beeswax comes in this size.
Oh, it doesn't.
It doesn't come in the other sizes.
Vary.
Yes. From now maybe there is a supplier there that makes different sizes of beeswax.
I also assume there's a different price point for beeswax and the red stuff.
There is, and also beeswax tends to have a much lower melting point, and it's also a lot more brittle. As you saw, I just broke it.
Because you can bend the other stuff with your
This
fingers.
one is very malleable. So, you know, they all have their different purposes. You know, there's also hard wax, which here you see, this we use to make rings. This has a much, much higher melting point. You can tell the difference. I'll just put, you see how long it takes for that one to just even start to melt? And it's really stringy.
And you usually do that with like a drill, right? To carve it?
Yeah, I usually use like tools, drills, knives, carving tools. It's a much harder wax. Where this one, you know, you can really almost just melt it in your hand. It's got such a low melting point. You know, it's super malleable now. And beeswax, like I said, it's very sticky. It dries very sticky, which makes it really nice to use as like the base where you're gonna stick it. Like I'll show you what I do when I make the base. But it's really nice to use it for that, and it's really nice to use it for when the leads attach to the ring, the gates, to make sure that these leads won't disconnect. It's less of an issue when you're dealing with a wax piece, but when you're dealing with a resin specifically, a lot of times resins do not behave very nicely with wax. You know, they tend to come loose from the resin, or they don't stick very nicely when they're dry. So the beeswax helps a lot with that, I've found.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew was showing us how the ring comes out of the printer.
Mm-hmm.
And it has, I don't know the word, I don't remember it. Is it leads of resin?
Supports.
Supports?
Mm-hmm.
A lot like what you're adding now. Couldn't you just leave those?
You could.
Does that ever work?
It does. So sometimes when you are growing a ring and you have extra supports plus the sprues that I asked for, it makes Andrew's job really, really difficult because he's gonna have to cut the supports out while leaving the leads, which sometimes makes that a really, really difficult job. So, but yes, it is possible, and we have done it before, where we have grown a ring with the leads built in. It certainly is possible. It's just that most of the time, we have found that it's a lot easier for me to add the leads after the fact than it is for Andrew to try and work around a resin that has them built in. But there's some designs, especially when it's really, 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 really small, that he will build the leads for me into the resin, which is very nice for me. Okay. All right. So I'm pretty happy with this. So you see we have a lead coming into the top, a lead coming into the side, and it should be the same thing on the other side. I don't see any imperfections in the ring that I need to fix with wax, which is nice. Sometimes when a ring comes out of the grower, there's like a little pit mark or something that I need to fill with wax, but looks pretty good. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we have 3 rings that we're going to cast in 14 yellow. So we need, here's the ring that has the 1 lead, so you guys can see. And this is another ring that has multiple leads that we are going to all cast together. So what I need to do now is I need to go weigh all of these and calculate how much gold I'm going to need for the casting, basically. So what we're going to do now, we're in the casting room. We're going to go ahead and weigh these. So 3 grams. So then we have to do a calculation. So we're looking about 50 grams of gold, about. Okay.
And that gold is going to fill the leads?
It's going to fill the leads and the ring, and there needs to be enough to create a button. And I can. Is
that the next lesson?
Yeah, we can go.
Next step?
Yeah, it's the next one. When we do the casting, I could show you guys, tell you guys about the button. All right, so we're back on the wax bench. What we're going to do now is we're going to take all our resins that we're going to turn into gold rings, and we're going to put it on the base. So this base is the base of a flask, and this is the flask. This is basically what goes into the kiln, and we'll get to that process next. But essentially, this goes on here after we put all our resins in, and then this gets filled with the investment, which is a specialized plaster of Paris, and then from there it goes into the kiln after we take this off after it dries, and we can show that to you. So the goal right now is to make sure we get a base for the flask that is large enough so we could fit all our resins. I hope I got the right size. Sometimes after we get through this, we find that it's not the right size, but from what I'm looking at, I think it should be okay. So what I usually try and do is I start with the beeswax. I put a liberal amount of beeswax on here, and this, like I said, makes it really, really, really nice for the resins to stick. And what I'm doing now is the same thing as with the gates. I want to make sure that when the ring is on the base, there's no sharp edges, no sharp corners, so that when it's cast, like I said, there's no investment breaking away. That is the goal. So now what I'm doing is making sure everything's nice and rounded out, and all the rings are fused, all the wax is fused to the base, because you don't want any of the rings to break away in the middle of the investing process. So you want to make sure everything's thoroughly melted together so that when it dries, it's all one cohesive piece of wax. Okay, looks pretty good. So now it's the cleanup. Get rid of all the extra wax around the base that we don't need.
What's the most rings you've ever cast in one flask?
In one flask, the most amount of rings, or the most amount of like things?
Pieces.
Sure. Oh, pieces. Well, Izzy had a bracelet that I cast recently in silver that I think was 48, I believe, pieces.
Like links of a bracelet?
Yeah.
And so you had to make a lead for each one?
Well, that was a tree, which is a bit of a different process. But essentially you take like something like, something like this, and then you go and you put a lead going to the link on at an angle. Like all the way up, like branches, so it looks like a tree. And that, yeah. Now we're just cleaning up the edge so that we have a nice, smooth surface. And voila. Okay, so we have our base that we're going to cast to put the flask on, and then these are the 3 rings that we're going to cast in 14 karat yellow together. Okay. So these are the 3 things we're going to cast. This is the white gold, it's 1 ring. This is the sterling silver, and then these are the 3 yellow gold rings that we're going to cast. And from here, we'll go over to the casting room.